Welcome to the City of Madeira Beach Local Planning Agency Planning Commission meeting Monday, April 5th, 2021 at 6 p.m. This meeting is now called to order. Can we please have the roll call?
Commissioner Gaither?
Here.
Commissioner Brooks?
Here.
Commissioner Preston? Here. Commissioner Kerr?
Here.
Commissioner Wyckoff?
Here.
Commissioner Noble?
Here. Agenda item number 3, public comment. Do we have anybody here for an open public comment? Then we'll move on to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes from the March 22nd, 2021 meeting. Anybody have any issues with the minutes?
March minutes are not provided. They're going to be given to you at the May 3rd meeting, along with this night's minutes.
Okay, moving on. Agenda item number 5, new business, ordinance 2020-24, consistency. I believe we have the city.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chairs, Commissioners. For the record, Jerry Murphy with the University of Florida. So what you have in item 5A is ordinance 2020-24. You saw this once before. This is the mobility fee ordinance. At the time, you passed it on to the commission so that they could have a first reading, which they have done. But we have not had any finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan. And that's because ordinance 2020-21, which is the level of service ordinance, amending the comprehensive plan to establish levels of service on which you can base your proportionate share development fees, had not been adopted. At this point, the commission has transmitted that ordinance to the state. The state has reviewed it. They've found no issues with that. They've mentioned to us that we need to do our evaluation and appraisal report, which we're doing, so that wasn't specifically addressing the LOS ordinance, or the level of service ordinance. So the Board of Commissioners of the city is set to hear that ordinance, the LOS ordinance 2020-21, on April 14th. And because we've been asked to fast track, so to speak, these proportionate share development fee ordinances, we're asking you to find consistency with the comprehensive plan if the Board of Commissioners passes that ordinance on second reading on the 14th of April. If they don't, we'll be back, but I'm pretty sure they will. It's not been controversial up until this point. So the ordinance that you have in front of you has also been amended, and that's probably the most significant part of our discussion tonight. When we originally developed the level of service for mobility, we included stormwater because the majority of your stormwater is basically in your roads, and if the roads are filled up with stormwater, then there's no mobility. So the two are tied together very closely. However, after we did that, we discovered that the city has a stormwater fee. It's a utility fee. It's not very clear what it is for. It's not a big fee. It's certainly not capturing the value of the stormwater level of service, but because that fee is there, we can't include stormwater in the mobility impact fee until at some point, if that's the direction of the commission, that fee is sort of unwound from the stormwater utility itself and becomes just an operation fee. You'll recall that impact fees go for facilities, equipment, and for land, but they can't be based on operations, at least under the current statute. So operations would be a separate thing for the stormwater fee, but that's not the situation now. So we've removed all of the assets related to stormwater from the calculation of the fee. And if you look at page 8 of 15 of the ordinance, or page 10 of 46 of your packet, you'll see the change that we've made to remove the value of the stormwater assets and hence reduce the fee. The bottom line is that the value of the assets has been reduced by about half, and so has the fee. So originally, the fee was going to be $2.88 per square foot. It's now been reduced to $1.50 per square foot. And so what we're looking for you, after we answer any questions you might have, would be a recommendation of a finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan, with that caveat that they have to pass the LOS ordinance on second reading on the 14th. I'm happy to answer any questions or explain anything that I have covered.
Linda, does the staff have anything to add to it?
Sorry about that. No, we're good.
And is there any public comment before we ask our questions that might generate more questions? Okay, no public comment. Does anybody have any questions for Jerry?
Nothing's changed besides what you just described. So we've already reviewed and approved this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just need a motion to accept the changes.
And a recommendation of a finding of consistency with the comprehensive plan.
Robert Preston, I make a motion to accept the ordinances with the changes and with the consistency with comprehensive plan.
Commissioner Gaither will second.
Okay, could we go to the vote, please?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks?
Yes.
Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Wykoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
The vote passes unanimously.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Jerry. Agenda item 5, new business, B, Schooner, Plan Development 2021-01, rezoning application, staff report and recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, Robert Eschenfelder with the City Attorney's Office. Since this is a quasi-judicial, I'll go ahead and read the quasi-judicial procedures that apply. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Planning Commission acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the Commission is required by law to make findings based upon the evidence presented at the hearing and apply those findings of fact previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The Commission may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the Commission is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinances, then the Commission is required by law to find against the applicant. There is an established procedure which will be followed at this quasi-judicial hearing. All witnesses must give their testimony under oath. All persons testifying at this hearing must give their name and address for the record. All testimony and questioning at the hearing must address matters that are relevant and material to the issues under consideration. The city staff will present its testimony and evidence first. The applicant will then have an opportunity to cross-examine the city staff if it so desires. The applicant will then present its testimony and witnesses. The city staff will have an opportunity to cross-examine the applicant's witnesses if it so desires. Members of the public opposing the application, if any, will then be given an opportunity to present testimony. After all members of the public speaking in opposition to the application have concluded, members of the public in support of the application will have an opportunity to present testimony. Each member of the public is limited to 4 minutes of testimony. The applicant will then have an opportunity to make a closing argument or summary, after which the city staff will be given an opportunity to make a closing argument or summary. Following this, the board will consider the matter Members of the board may ask questions of witnesses at this point in the proceedings. A motion will be made and a vote will be taken. So at this point, I would ask all witnesses that are intending to, or all persons that are intending to provide evidence tonight to stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mr. Chair and Board of Commissioners, as you recall, we started this hearing, and this is a continuation to this time certain. We had advertised it in 2 different rounds to make sure that everybody knew for sure what was going on here and knew when their opportunities to speak would be. And when we presented last time, we got through presentation on what was intended for the development, but at the end, when we were going over the conditions, there were some additional concerns that were raised by the staff in regards to impacts on the beach and environmental impacts and things of that nature. So you had asked us to go back and meet with the petitioners more and see if we could come up with an agreement on how to address those issues and come back with an amended set of conditions. And that's what I have for you tonight. So I'm going to hand them out. We did get asked why we hadn't presented that to begin with, and I've given it to you earlier. But remember, we were in the middle of a hearing, and you're supposed to hear all the evidence and all of the presentations about a quasi-judicial item at the hearing. And so we had to wait until we got back here, present it to you, and then go over it all together. Now, I know that we were in agreement on the language that I had sent over originally. The attorney did make some suggested language changes, and I made those at the last minute today. I believe there's probably at least one point I know the petitioner want to address in more detail and clarification as to whether they think it's needed or not. It regards to the valet. Now, as you recall, that I think it's items 8 down were the ones that we added on. 1 through 7 were there before, except that they were slightly amended here and there. Actually, mostly as a result of what the petitioner asked because of some clarifications. I think we've got that cleaned up. Except number 6, you'll notice that the attorney felt that it was a little bit nebulous. I had said that they'd provide a plan for valet parking for people moving from, so it's the building on the west, excuse me, that was an error. Building on the west and the parking lot at the east. Let's make that correction. And that I should specify in the condition what situation that is intended to mitigate and how often or at what extent the valet was to be provided. And so I added in specifically that it was intended to avoid the danger of pedestrian auto conflict between those crossing between the hotel and the parking lot across the street, and that the valet service will be available 24/7 as a condition of development plan approval. That was the staff's recommendation and intent to begin with, and I thought I understood when we talked about that was the intent of their service provision as well, but I think they had some question about whether 24/7 operation would actually be required or for how long it'd be required if they're able to move the crosswalk. So I'll wait for them to get up. They'll probably have some questions about that one. From there down, we made some amendments, but for the most part, I think everything's consistent with what we approved. That was my intention, to get it that way anyway. So number 8, the bar, restaurant, meeting space could accommodate a maximum equivalent of 160 patrons in-house being served at any one time, unless and until the required additional parking is provided in the future parking structure or the required additional parking is contracted within the required distance by another provider in accordance with city parking standards for the use and area. And the intent there is not to hold 160 people in the whole building, but that's the number that would be served in the restaurant or the meeting space at any one time. And so sometimes you have a conference and you've got all of them in meetings and then they break up and all go to the restaurant or something of that nature. So we didn't want there to be double that because there's not that much parking. The parking requirement is that because this is a mixed use, the event and the restaurant parking requirements would be calculated at 50% of their normal rate on top of the hotel requirements. So that's what we're proposing. Now, that gave them the 160 we're talking about here, but we understand the building itself may have more capacity for that, but that, and at some time when they add more parking, or if they come up with a contract, like with the county wanted to contract with them next door, and they had the ability to park some of their time in the evening somewhere else, if it all meets code as to distance and travel capacity, they would be able to get to a full capacity of the building. In the meantime, this was what's intended, that we don't want more people than we can park. And they don't either. They want to provide a higher level of service than that. Number 9, the future structure planned on the east of Gulf Boulevard is allowed 1 floor of additional parking above that required for current operation and future commercial. And what we talked about with that, and they were actually offering that as a willingness to go higher, potentially, or we have to specify we would allow them to go higher and add a floor if they needed that to accommodate the fuller use of their existing buildings and structures. And also, if the public, if the city evaluates the situation in the area seems to demand more parking, if we've got more impact on streets or things of that nature, we want to be able to provide more public accommodation for parking, that they would be willing to consider that as they go through construction. And the reason we have to specify that is that parking is not a freestanding or a commercial use that's allowed in this district, so we can't allow people to have excess parking that they would then use for a separate kind of business. It has to be something that's approved, so we wanted to be able to specify that up front, that we would allow that negotiation in the future. Number 10, the hotel will provide hotel guests with lounge chairs, cabanas for the use on the beach, and will provide services to these guests as customary for hotels. The non-hotel guests will have access to the restaurant of the hotel, but full restaurant service will not be extended to the beach. No tables and standard chairs or picnic tables for that purpose would be allowed. And that language was tweaked just a little bit this afternoon because the attorney, when they read it, didn't know which tables I was talking about. It was just a little bit too wide open. There may be other kinds of tables that they're able to provide along with cabanas and things like that. Didn't want to get that mixed up or prevent them from using the standard equipment for serving their guests. The hotel, number 11, the hotel and events operations will utilize the beach for special events approved by the city special events permit. We do have a process for that. It's not terribly hard, but we like to know what's going on and make sure that if there's extension of premise for alcohol or anything like that, that it's all permitted appropriately through the state. I'm not certain they would actually need that, but we will make sure that whenever somebody's having a special event, all the department heads sign off to make sure that we don't anticipate any garbage or traffic problems or dangers or environmental impacts, things like that. We do process those pretty quick. They're normally required to be turned in 90 days before the event. They usually show up a day or so before the event. So we try to accommodate. The hotel, number 12, the hotel staff will police the area used by customers to ensure it is clean and free of debris of any kind, that all furnishings and equipment is removed nightly in accordance with the leave no trace requirements. You know, that's in our code for the protection of the turtles and other environmental concerns. We don't like equipment or anything out there on the beach. And we talked about that a lot, about the turtles and the need for safety out there. And so number 13 says, where turtle nests are found, hotel access and operation will be altered as needed to ensure the integrity of the nest and safety of the hatchlings. All hotel rooms and public areas will be posted with notices regarding sea turtle safety and requirements. All turtle lighting requirements, as may be updated and amended from time to time, will be met on an ongoing basis during turtle season. And the city does provide information that can be used in placards and other kinds of leave-behind notices, that can be used in all of the rental units around town, and we're getting more and more sophisticated about that every year, and trying to get the word out and helping the property owners inform their guests as best we can. And of course, we have the daily patrols, early morning patrols, and night patrols also to check on lighting. So it's not impossible to do, and with this being a new building, they'll be starting from scratch with all of their lighting and everything, and we'll work with them over time as they go through design to make sure that they meet those conditions. With those, the staff would recommend approval with the conditions as proposed. We did not receive any objections. We have a couple of people here who will probably want to speak because they're here. So I suspect that's what their intent is. We understood the petitioner thought that we had some support letters sent in, but we haven't found them on our system yet. So that's the extent of our presentation at this time.
All right, thank you, Linda. Would we open it up to public comment at this time?
I would like to ask the attorney, since there's people here who weren't last time, did we want to just summarize what what entails the development, the size, and everything?
Well, Mr. Chairman, under the city's adopted progression of events, after the staff presentation goes and the applicant has no cross-examination of staff, then it would be the applicant. You would then call the members of the public opposing, and then the members of the public in support after the applicant's presentation, which kind of only makes sense because then the citizens have heard both sides.
Sounds good. So let's hear from the applicant.
And as the applicant's coming up, I just want to remind the chair and members of the commission that this is a continuation of your first hearing that y'all had. So the evidence that you hear tonight is layered on top of the evidence and testimony you heard the first time as well. You can rely on both as you take your vote.
Thank you, sir.
I suggest that the applicant, if you want to kind of summarize what you're building, because there are some new people here this time.
Commissioners, how are you? Jeff Beggins of 429 Boca Ciega Drive here in Madeira Beach. And just summarizing kind of what we did last week, some of the things we heard and how we addressed it with staff and where we are today is kind of what I want to just bring everybody back to order. So this is the Schooner Hotel, which currently has 5 older buildings, right, scattered throughout, 3 on the Gulf, 1 on the east, 2 on the east side. And this is a proposal to consolidate all 5 of those older ones into one, and which is beneficial in a lot of different ways. So when we first started this process, it was a 6th floor and a rooftop, which makes 7, to Mr. Commissioner Preston's point right there. And then we had the next door, the Air Dam building immediately to the south of us, which is really a real affected party being immediately next door. So we reached out and went, met with the board, met with everybody who would meet with us, and had several meetings, and used some collaboration to figure out what can we do to make this better, because, you know, their story is 5, so 7-story building was going to block the view of everybody on that south side. So we kind of went into an idea, but if you turn a rectangle into an L, you lose that space. So we were saying we can do this, that'll open up a view corridor, but we've got to do something with this space. So we had to go higher on the L part of the building, and if they liked that idea, they said they liked that idea, so we engaged the architect and came up with a new plan, and that's how the current renderings that you guys have seen to us so far. There's 42 units on site right now. We're only proposing 56, which is allowed on the site, so it's not a huge increase in intensity. It's just 14 more units going in. Right now, as you guys all live here and drive by there, it's a disaster from a parking scenario with everybody back and forth. So this would really justify that and clean up that whole congested area right next to the county park. So we've taken a lot of that into consideration for what we're doing. And then hearing the feedback from that last meeting, we live here in town. I'm very ocean-oriented. I do a lot of work with the Ocean Foundations. I love the water, so we're going to take care of the turtles and everything associated, make it really appreciate the whole beach, what we're doing, and we will keep it clean. We will monitor that. So that's us, and it's me and my father as a partner with Kevin, who's here, runs an amazing hotel. So those are the players that you have involved here. So really, I just wanted to kind of bring you back up to speed. And we talked about the restaurant, making sure we didn't have any, we had some constraints that we're good with about how we can keep the hotel guest to a level that is everyone's comfortable with until and unless we build on the east side. And right now we have 2 levels in your package, and now this development agreement allows us to go 1 more should we need to. And then that will give us plenty of capacity to serve patrons in the front. So that's kind of what we're doing. We just wanted to bring you back up to speed, and any management questions, I'll have Kevin step up. But we're looking forward to bringing something really pretty into town, and hope we get some approvals for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Kevin Bowden. I live at 4729 Ruberto in Lutz, and own the Cambria here in town. Excited to be here, excited to get this hotel built. And Linda and I have met with Jeff and staff, you know, and really we've kind of worked through all the recommendations. We're really good with all of them. The only question that I have is that, and it's really a question for staff, if FDOT does approve the light to be moved in front of the hotel, I'd really like we will valet park during the hours of operation that our food and beverage outlets are open. To valet park, you know, after 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock on a weeknight until 7 in the morning, there really won't be any traffic there. So we would prefer to have the valet requirement be a requirement that kind of follows the hours of operation of our rooftop and food and beverage department. I think other than that, we are fine with all the recommendations of the city. And we'd just like you to consider that. I think that you'll just have someone hanging out. You know, most weeknights, Sunday through Thursday, there'll be no guests arriving after 11 p.m. and no guests leaving probably before 9 or 10 a.m. So having a valet there, they just wouldn't be doing anything. I think if we didn't get the crosswalk moved with the flashing light, I think we'll have to valet 24/7 just for safety. I don't want guests to be trying to cross that street, even at night. So happy to answer any questions, but that's really all I've got to say. Thank you. All right.
Jack Bosiak, 743 49th Street North, St. Pete. It's my office address. I just thought I'd stand up and see if there were any other questions that the board had. I think we went over everything pretty thoroughly, and it's been handled pretty thoroughly by the staff. So rather than go through the whole presentation again, unless there was any questions you had, I'd be glad to answer them this time.
Do you have anybody else who's going to speak on your behalf before we?
I don't think so. I think we're
Okay.
pretty much.
Anybody have any questions? Ray?
The architectural in the front of the building, it shows 2 parking spaces out front. Is that going to be the limit? Is that going to be strictly landscaping for that 50 feet from the curb to the building?
For the 50 feet?
Well, it's a 25-foot setback, and it's
25
got another
feet.
26 feet, I think, in the drawing to
Actually,
the stairs, and I think that's about the front of the building.
There aren't any in the 25-foot setback. You are allowed to actually put some out there because they measure from the curb on the FDOT setback to the parking, for example, for clearance off the street. But I don't understand 50 feet. Let me.
If you look at you probably have a much bigger drawing there. Yeah, you have 2 parking spots there, which is,
Two that, yeah, there are two that when you
there's
first.
18 feet, but it's overall, I think, 26 feet from the
Yeah,
setback to the front of the building. Everything to the south side of that seems just to be landscaping,
yeah.
which would make a big difference, I think, to make sure it's maintained that way, and that doesn't just turn into additional parking in front of the building as far as,
Well, the only reason that we did put those in is we wanted to try and get as many, you'll notice all the handicap spaces that are required really are on that side of the road. And with the holding position of that side of the road, when people are gonna pull up and check in and all that, we typically, they do allow, the city standards do allow you to put parking in there. If you look at most of the condos up and down the beach.
I can see that, and that's,
Yeah, and we just thought that in an effort to try and get as many on that side, so that there weren't as many trips back and forth, that we did put those 2 in the front. You know, that's something that I hate to lose 2 more spaces on that side, because we were talking about the fact that if you look at the condition of trying to eventually go to 24-hour valet, or even if you're not, it's nice to have as many holding spots over there for when people pull in a rush, as possible, so, you know,
I just didn't know if some of those were in the underground parking, you know, those holding spots also.
well, they're in the parking garage, yeah, they're in the
Right.
parking level,
So,
yeah. The others are all under the parking level, and those 2 are, in the setback in the front of the building.
I think real quick, the answer is, we intentionally left that to be pretty and not gonna park up at the front of that section from,
that wouldn't be,
other those 2 parking spots.
Yeah, those
This
2.
is all landscape.
that wouldn't be a bait and switch. You know, I hate to put it that way, but,
Yeah, we didn't pull those off the submittal plan, but yeah, I can pull those off if the,
no, the 2 are fine.
Yeah, but those 2, he just
We're,
wanted to make sure.
we're good with what,
I see.
I'm personally good with what you have drawn.
I thought you were talking about the,
No, I would just hate to see, you know.
you didn't wanna see the rest of the
Ever since the last meeting, I've
landscaping.
spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I think my original comment was, does it comply with the Duane plan and being closer to the street? And the more I think about it, on the golf side, on the beach side of Golf Boulevard, I'm okay with the taller, personally, because as you're going down the road, if you're just enjoying, you're not gonna see the beach anyway, because of the dunes and whatnot in between the buildings, but you do see the sky. And by having that 50-foot setback on that side, and then if it's just landscaping, it improves the community.
Yeah, on that side, the rest of the frontage does have an extensive setback to the car fronts.
So that you have your underground parking, and then you have your first-level parking, I think.
Yep.
That's all good, because that's all behind
Yeah.
the landscaping, that's all, you can architecturally make that.
Yeah, I got you on that now. I misunderstood what you were saying on that.
So the other thing I was thinking about is, I see you have 1 level of parking approved above, and we can discuss, or they can apply for more. My personal feeling is that it should be at least 1 more, but that on the Golf Boulevard side, you have retail down below. I think the face of that entire structure look like retail and not parking, because that's one thing you don't really want to see, or I don't want to see. Driving up and down Golf Boulevard is all there's another parking garage. If it's camouflaged, I think.
By store frontage,
By
yeah.
store frontage, you can be, you know what I think you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. The windows are continuous type of facade or whatever.
You have a little bit of that element in there, but not, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. You don't want it to look like, oh, there's the parking garage.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's kind of hidden, but and.
Well, we had some different versions of that, how it looked in the front, you know, I'll discuss with the owners whether they wanna try and, you know, make that a little less looking like.
If you build this rooftop restaurant bar, you
Yeah.
will have patrons, you will have residents, which is great. It's another service for the community. And you will use that parking lot, and if a storm comes through, it's gonna be a safe haven for people to park their cars. You know, if a flooding event is expected, things like that. So it is a service, but no one wants to look at a parking garage, so
Okay.
that's my input, so.
Thank you, Ray. Any other questions?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, hey, Mr. President.
What is the definition of a cabana?
Of a what?
Definition of the cabana?
Of a cabana?
Yeah, I'm used to cabanas being a permanent structure.
Not necessarily, no. There-
But what is your
let
definition
me
of a
let,
cabana?
Let me let Kevin explain what he's saying.
So cabana, it would need to be small enough to be a removable issue, right? So it would have posts, maybe a daytime couch inside, lounge chairs. We would put the furniture out in the morning, so our guests can kind of go out into the beach. What we made clear with Linda is that we wouldn't, turn it into tabletops for extra dining out there. So cabanas, like you said, cabana can be a permanent structure. You know, at some hotels, they have bathrooms in them and stuff, and otherwise, they're also just kind of a tent, almost a tent around, to get you in some shade.
So you're talking about a floor-posted, that's why the definition of what you are intending to put out there is important. And,
I mean, we recognize that it's got, so we haven't bought it yet, but we recognize that it needs to be put out and taken away at night, right? So it'll be lightweight enough where we can put it out and pull it back in.
and lounge chairs rather than tables, correct?
Yeah, lounge chairs, because we didn't want to encourage people that are just on the beach, turning our dining room into a dining room that's on the beach, right? So it really is reserved seating for hotel guests. That really will be on our land. You know, the hotel owns down to the high watermark. So really just the convenience of one of our guests that are lounging, walking down from the pool area out to the beach. We'll provide our own materials. I know there's been some talk about the people that currently rent chairs to people out there. We wouldn't be using them to do what we're gonna do here. And just to go back a second, we're agreeable that if that building across the street becomes 3 stories, because we need to have parking, we'll make the front of it look like a building. We don't want to see a parking garage across from our hotel either. The front of the front of my Cambria hotel, we kind of camouflage with it with shutters, so it doesn't look like a parking garage is, you know, right there. But I thought I would just jump back to.
Appreciate that.
Totally agree with that.
So the way I read this is 24/7 until Florida Department of Transportation approves the crosswalk, correct?
They approve moving the crosswalk right in front of the hotel.
If they don't, then it's still 24/7.
We're gonna have to, yeah. But I think if they approve the crosswalk taking our guests across, then I think if you would permit, we would ask that it follow the hours of our food and beverage outlet operation.
And I would like to add, I think that we need to add a half hour, because when you close,
Sure.
then you have a half hour of time frame, so it needs to be plus 1/2 hour of your operation of food and beverage.
That would be great, thank you.
And then that covers the people that are, that you've let loose out of the bar and restaurants.
Sure.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions?
And I guess this would be for Linda on my comments, is that, is that something that would be acceptable?
Yes. Yeah, when they added in the lounge-type chairs and cabanas in parentheses, the intention was that sometimes people refer to them back and forth as different. We could put in there also known as cabanas, if you'd like to make it clear that it's a temporary chair, we're not building something.
Right, because my understanding of cabana is something that is permanent, and I want to make clear that it's not a permanent structure.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if I could, so when courts look at language in contracts and statutes and so forth, one of the primary rules of construction is that you use the plain English language that is commonly understood of a word, unless that word is defined in the document with some unique definition. And so I just looked up the definition of cabana online, and it's always some variation of a small, lightweight, tent-like structure with an opening, usually facing the water on a beach. And I think that's the common general understanding of cabana. I really would advise you against trying to create a new definition of cabana. I think the generally understood one that we've used in the country for a very long time. But a cabana, in fact, is not a chair, and so I wouldn't want to conflate the two. A chair is a chair, a cabana is the thing that goes over you so that you don't get sunburned.
Thank you. Yeah, I think
Thank you.
cabana used to also be in the olden days a changing room, but I don't think they plan to have people changing at the cabanas. They're just going to do with the umbrella, kind of like the things we see out there now, but a little nicer. Any other questions?
I will clarify that to say lounge chair, type chairs and cabanas, since they're not a chair, per the attorney's recommendation. And then, if there are no other recommendations, we would add on some language dealing with the building on the east side, having a facade with architectural detail to disguise the nature of the parking garage. That is what your intent, if the board is agreeable to all that. And then I understood the language on the number 6 to read, unless the FDOT approves the moving the crosswalk directly in front of the hotel. Otherwise, it would be, and if that's the case, that the valet would be provided during hours of food and beverage operations plus 1/2 hour.
If I might, I'd just like to add with the crosswalk that if it does get moved, the proper lighting is provided.
Right, okay.
So, Mr. Chair, unless the applicant has any, or the staff has any cross-examination of the applicant, now would be your time to call for anyone speaking against and then anyone speaking for.
We have no further questions.
And we'll go to the public, and if you're against the project, to speak first. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes and state your name and address. Nobody opposed, so then we will go to the public comment for people that are pro.
Hello, my name's Ed Stapor. I'm at 605 55th Avenue in St. Pete Beach, but I own a condo at Erie Dam, the neighbor, and so I just think it's a great plan. As they've already noted, they've been very, very open with us and telling us what their plans, listening to us, and so I think there's going to be a great partners, and I think it's going to certainly help, the overall Madera Beach community, having, a new hotel or a place for people to enjoy themselves. So all for it. I think it's great and appreciate exactly everything that they've been doing to work with us, to listen to our needs. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Kurt Miller. I'm a business owner of 14603 Gulf Boulevard. I've been up here several times, and again, this seems to be very much a no-brainer as far as taking 3 of the most underdeveloped, dilapidated buildings on Gulf Boulevard and making it into what would only be described as a, you know, a destination hotel that is a pride of the city. So I hope we're all on board with approving this and doing whatever to make this move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? So we'll close the public comment.
So the applicant may make a closing statement if it desires, or it may waive it. And the staff may make a closing statement or may waive.
And I think that we've clarified all that the board discussed. If you want to add anything into that, or if you do have to agree among yourself that when you're deciding on the findings, I recommend that you do accept the findings as recommended in the staff report, because it's important in a quasi-judicial hearing that you are making findings. So you'll notice that the staff report has findings under all the conditions. And you can just accept those and also specify the conditions as presented tonight and as amended, if you want all those amendments, otherwise you decide among yourself if you're changing any of that.
Okay, thank you. The staff is done with their closing. So if anybody would like to make a motion there, I think that...
Robert Preston, I move to approve the project with conditions that were brought up, which is the facade for the parking, if built, half-hour plus on the valet parking. And there was one other, correct?
The amendment of the cabana language.
The cabana language. Thank you.
And then the other additional comments that were brought to you tonight are the full list of comments as presented tonight. That was everything we went through, yes.
Everything includes everything inside this.
Okay. Thank you.
Conditions presented by the city.
And the findings.
And findings.
Thank you.
Mr. Attorney, was that a good motion?
It was good enough. The minutes will make it prettier.
Okay,
I will second the motion.
thank you. And we can go to the vote.
Commissioner Gaither?
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks? Yes. Commissioner Preston?
Yes.
Commissioner Kerr?
Yes.
Commissioner Wykoff?
Yes.
Commissioner Noble?
Yes.
The vote passes unanimously.
All right, thank you, everybody. Very good presentation. City, thank you for the hard work. Moving on to agenda item number 6, old business. We have nothing under old business. 7, administrative presentations, nothing. Number 8, no open discussion, planning commission items. So our next meeting is May 3rd, 2021. No informational materials, so this meeting is adjourned. Good one.